Hey retro gamers. Today on Smashing Bricks, we live the entire geological history of Earth, but specifically the year 1992, in E.V.O. Search for Eden for the Super Nintendo. Hey, welcome back to Smashing Bricks, a retro gaming podcast. This is episode 40. My name is Eddie Inzauto, and today I'm joined by a returning guest. He's a gamer, a podcaster, and something this country is in dire need of, an educator. It's Anthony LaBella.
Hello.
Hey, Anthony, how's it going?
Happy to be here. I feel you called me an educator, which is true. I'm a teacher, but I feel like I'm going to be out of my element when it comes to geological history. That was not my strong suit in school.
And sometimes I forget, but you have like little projects related to video games sometimes going on. Do you have anything still going on now?
Not currently, but I was playing around with the idea of doing a video game design class after school because we have these enrichment classes. So
Oh, wow.
I always like to throw that idea out there. The kids really enjoy that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. So the PlayStation exploration is on hold for now?
It is on hold for now. It's on hiatus.
Okay. Got it. All right. So forget the PlayStation. We're going to go with the console that the PlayStation was originally supposed to be an add-on for, the Super Nintendo. We're playing E.V.O. Search for Eden. Not the Search for Eden, but E.V.O. And we don't know what E.V.O. stands for. I don't think anyone does. Do you?
I don't. And it has the periods in it like it's an acronym, so.
Yeah, right? It's an acronym or a typo. Who
or
knows?
A typo.
An extended typo that lasts for the whole game and throughout time. Because it could just be a shortening, an abbreviation, if that made sense. Because it's about evolution. So It's referring to evolution, but it's called E.V.O. Search for Eden. And I guess we'll just jump into this game overview. So it was released in 1992, December 21st in Japan, and July 15th, 1993 in North America for the Super Famicom and the Super NES. And that's it. It was made by the Almanac Corporation, which curiously sounds real close to Almanac, which is an educational book of sorts. And it was published by Enix, who was publishing a lot of things back then. A lot of good things. I think you're playing Terranigma. Did they publish that?
I am. They did publish Terranigma.
Yeah, there we go. Actually, some people who worked on this worked on games by that group, Quintet. But anyway, we'll get to that. It's sort of, would you say, an action platformer with RPG elements? That's what I wrote. Think that's
I'd say pretty light RPG elements, more action platformer than anything else.
Yeah, you're kind of upgrading, but overall the game is structured in 5 worlds with 9 to 18 locations in each, and they're each an overworld map, just like Super Mario World, and then what the instruction manual calls action scenes, which are just the game, where you're side-scrolling, either swimming or walking. Or potentially flying. I've heard tell that you can fly, but I was never able to do it. Okay. Did you fly in this game?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, I'm so jealous and can't wait to hear about that.
The flying school.
Very cool. But mostly it's like kind of fairly slow moving and mostly non-complex level layouts, I would say. And each level is just filled with a varying amount of quote-unquote enemy creatures that you have to kill and eat. You're biting to attack, potentially kicking, and potentially hitting with a bone or an axe later in the game. You can jump. You can eat things that are just in the environment, and you can do like a dash and ram attack for the quote-unquote bodily attack as listed in the instruction manual. what we were talking about with the RPG elements is we earn experience points throughout the game for eating our enemies' remains, and then we use those to buy upgrades to our body parts, which are jaws, horns, neck, body, limbs, tail, dorsal fin, and back of head. So that's the extent of the RPG stuff, right? It's just kind of upgrading. And I have the little evolution menu here, which we can refer to later, because sometimes you don't even know what they do. You got to refer back to the
That's
manual.
true, yeah. It's kind of a crapshoot if you're not looking it up.
Yeah, or you can check your stats, because you do have stats in one of the menu
that's
items. True. It's large sprites. We're just going back and forth. It's 2-dimensional, colorful. It's got some parallax backgrounds. And it's educational? Question mark? Because you go through time from 5 million BCE to 3 million, and the dates are a little off if you're super familiar with geologic time periods, but it's pretty close. I'm not going to get into the specifics of like when Australopithecus came into being and when the first Homo erectus and whatever, but they're pretty close. They're slightly off, but our understanding of geologic history has changed since then, so maybe it was right for then.
Sure.
But as the story goes, we have a personified Gaia character who is the daughter of the sun, giving instructions to us, the player, and the main character, who is just called Life, as we go through the ages with the goal of reaching the paradise, Eden, and becoming Gaia's partner for all eternity, I guess. So there's some fantastical stuff. That's kind of fantastical, and there's other fantastical stuff, which we'll get to. But that seems like that's the game. Anything you want to add for the overview?
No, I think that covers just about everything. And the upgrades we'll talk more about, but that's a really important part. I feel like that makes the game what it is the upgrade system. So we'll get into that.
Yeah. Have you ever played this game before?
I had not. So it's weird. My Super Nintendo background is strange in that I was very young when we got a Super Nintendo, and it's mostly my brother buying the games. So even some of the classics we didn't have for Super Nintendo, and definitely didn't have E.V.O, but you were asking me what game we should play next, and I was already playing E.V.O on my analog pocket through emulation, because I was looking up hidden gems for old consoles. I like to do that every now and again and go, I've never heard of this before. Let me try it out. So I saw E.V.O on a list of hidden gems for the console and thought it sounded neat with its evolution premise and the upgrade system. So I thought, let me give it a shot. And then you texted me and we decided to do E.V.O.
Yeah, it's such an interesting serendipitous alignment of our lives, because you just so happened to pick out this one little game from 1992, and I was in the midst of a marathon of watching YouTube videos about the history of the Earth, like all the geological history and all the animals and how things were changing over the years. I was like up to the Cambrian period when we talked about this, and I was like, this is a good idea. Let's do this.
Right.
But this game, I used to rent this periodically. Like I rented this a number of times, along with my friends George and Brian, who rented it a number of times. And I never made it past the second world, early creatures of land, 300 to 230 million BC. I only really had a solid memory of the water levels, which is the first world, basically. And I guess a couple later on, but that was what I remembered. And just the beginning of being on foot. I didn't remember the second boss at all.
Yeah.
So it was difficult for me as a kid, I guess, or something, or maybe, I don't know, short rental times. But I always had a special place in my heart for it, because the premise is so interesting to me, and I thought it was super cool when I was a kid, how you could upgrade in so many different ways. And I remember when Spore was about to come out, in the
Oh.
anticipatory years for Spore
Mm-hmm.
from Maxis and Will
Yeah.
Wright, I think.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. Like there was hype for that. And I was like, oh, the OG of this was E.V.O, Search for Eden on the Super Nintendo. I played that game all the time.
You're on the forum saying, this is like E.V.O, everyone, and they're looking at you quizzically.
Yeah,
huh?
like we don't know what that is. Go away. And then Spore ended up being like not great. Like I remember just enjoying the creature creator, and the game was not much of a game.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that's how we feel about this game. But as we said, it came out at the end of 1992 in Japan and mid 93 over here in North America. Some of the games that were out at this time, it had a lot to compete with. So Street Fighter II hit the SNES in 1992. Link to the Past came out in North America in 92, 91 in Japan. Super Mario Kart was 92. Mario Paint was 92. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Streets of Rage 2 came out on the Genesis that year. And I'm sure some other games too. And then Enix's own Dragon Quest V and Squaresoft's Final Fantasy V both came out for Super Famicom in Japan. And as I said, like there were tons of games coming out at this time. So the 16-bit era was really firing on all cylinders, which is probably why this has been described as hidden, whether it's a gem or not a gem. And we'll see what the publications of the time said. But what I discovered literally today was that this was based on an earlier role-playing game called E.V.O, The Theory of Evolution, or 46 Okunen Monogatari, the Shinkaran, which I don't know why the word "the" is in there. That sounded very Japanese. Called 46 Billion Year Story, The Theory of Evolution, which was for a Japanese microcomputer from NEC that I had never heard of until this morning, the PC-98 or 9801, 9800, whatever. It was a series. And it was just like, one of the computers, just like all the European ones, like the BBC Micro and the Atari.
Yeah, I think the PC-98 had a lot of erotic games for it. It has really incredible pixel art, is what I recall of that. Yeah.
Interesting. So
it has an interesting history. It's worth looking up.
Yeah. Incredible pixel art means incredible erotica.
Apparently.
For horny boys.
For very horny people, yeah.
And girls. Maybe. Probably
of course. Probably not, but it's an option.
Yeah. So I mentioned that this game was more fantastical rather than purely scientific, but they did get assistance from teachers from local schools to provide information on geology and biology so the programmers could work off of that. And I just said that earlier, and I just said it again, so one of those two will be cut out. The North American version was translated and marketed by Enix America and was planned for March in 93, but it got delayed at the last minute and came out in the summer. That's the extent of what we know about the development. Some of the people behind the game were art director Masahiro Hirasawa and producer Keizo Mochizuki, who worked on Soul Blazer. Mm-hmm. Soul Blazer's popular in internet lore because it's usually considered part of the Quintet trilogy, which is Illusion of Gaia, Soul Blazer, and Terranigma. But I also read an interview that came out in like 2014 where a producer from that time claimed that there was no relation between Soul Blazer and the other two Quintet games, but Soul Blazer is a sort of prequel to ActRaiser, which are other Enix published games. And it makes sense because Soul Blazer, this is just a side note, but I find it interesting. Soul Blazer is a similar game where you're doing things to kind of repopulate the little town you're in, but going through action sequences. But anyway, I never heard that before. I always was under the impression these 3 games, they were this unofficial trilogy.
Right, I just knew the trilogy.
I want to look into more of that. Maybe we'll play, well, you're already playing Terra Enigma. Maybe I'll play Terra Enigma, and we'll talk about that soon.
Right.
And the director/designer Takashi Yoneda may or may not have worked as a designer on ActRaiser. I've gotten conflicting information about that. It said that he did, and then I went and looked into ActRaiser, and the name was nowhere to be found. But then I looked somewhere else, and it said ActRaiser. So I don't know.
Interesting.
I also don't know how it sold. That information's not really available.
I'm going to guess not well based on the reception, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Yeah, probably. And I had a fun note here. The company later held a promotional contest where players would send in pictures of their favorite customized creatures from the game to win a free game from Enix. That's cool. I think Spore did the same thing later on, whatever it was, 10, 15 years later. The reviews. Average to below average, right? You want to read through these?
Yeah, so a few of the ratings we saw. So All Game gave it a 2 out of 5. GamePro gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Nintendo Power gave it a 3.6 out of 5. And Superplay gave it a 47 out of 100.
Yeah, that's so we're from 40 to 72%.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
Yeah. What Wikipedia said was most critics enjoyed the originality of the game, but criticized the tedious gameplay and subpar graphics. I don't know about that. We'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah.
But in February 2007, IGN came by and ranked this game second in its list of the greatest prehistoric games of all time, quote-unquote prehistoric games, stating no other title before or since has so effectively captured the essence of evolutionary theory in video game form. And then they also ranked it 42nd on their top 100 SNES games, calling it one of the most brilliantly original game designs ever conceived.
Wow.
Interesting. 42nd. I could probably name 43 games that are widely considered period, more than this game.
Right. Forget considered best.
Widely known about, yeah. Okay, let's move on. Let's go to our replay experience, because we played this. We played it.
We did.
What stood out to you immediately as something that you need to talk about this game right off the bat?
I think what makes this game, I mentioned it earlier, is that upgrade system. So I remember when I was looking up the hidden gems lists and all that, I saw how you could be very creative in how you upgrade your creature throughout the game, and that seemed very intriguing to me. I can't think of many games where you get to pick the parts and what the head's going to look like and how you're going to upgrade your arms and things like that. So that's kind of what hooked me. And I feel like that's what kept me going through the game, because I did beat the game all the way through to the end. And part of me didn't want to at a certain point, but I really enjoyed the upgrading and the customization aspect to it. I do feel like it gets a bit grindy, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, but I was always very captivated by how my dinosaur was going to look once I picked the X upgrade or the Z upgrade, or once I went into the water versus on land. I thought the theming of evolution with the upgrade system was very expertly done, and it's what kept me going through the whole game.
Yeah, the theme is really on point. It's like so intriguing, so captivating as an idea. But as a game, aside from the upgrades, which I'm just going to come back to in a second, but essentially you walk around or swim around, you see an enemy or 5 or 2 or 0, you bite them repeatedly. You try to stun lock things if you can. You try not to get stun locked yourself. They die. They leave a little sprite of meat on a bone. You eat that. It gives you a certain amount of E.V.O points and a much smaller amount of health. You do that over and over. And then you use those points to pick a thing that you want to evolve. And in those menus, you have a list of different named items. Like you'll have the fierce jaws, or the Tyrannosaurus jaws, or the weird name of some creature that doesn't really exist jaws, etc. Or like the spring tail, or the long tail, or the spike tail, or the armor body, or the speckled body. So you get an inkling of what it might be or do. But I think the most information you get is from how much it costs. And pretty much all the time, except for very few occasions, the most expensive one is the best one. It does the most for your stats, for your defense, for your offense, for your hit points, whatever. But there are some interesting like sequences of evolution that you can do to get like specialized evolutions, where you'll go in and it'll say evolve further, but only if you've evolved in a certain way. Right. Did you use any kind of a guide to figure out how to evolve into certain things, or did you experiment and like buy different things and see how it looked? Maybe you use save states to save before evolving and then to add and like that and go back. Did you have a wealth of points to use where you could do that? Did you have a dearth of points to use where it was stressful? Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, it's kind of a push-pull in that I really like the upgrade system, but there's also the tediousness of it. So I would say what I ended up doing was grinding a lot to get a lot of evolution points, E.V.O points. So I constantly had more than enough E.V.O points to upgrade however I liked. But I had heard, when I was looking the game up, I had heard of these kind of secret evolutions that you could discover. So I went in with the thought of, let me play around with different evolutions rather than buying the most expensive one every single time, because those usually are the strongest, like you said. But I wanted to see if I could stumble upon some of the secret evolutions. I think I did one time, but then I would get so annoyed by how much I'd have to grind to get all those E.V.O points that I started looking up a guide at a certain point. And I didn't have the benefit of save states. The SNES Core on Analog Pocket doesn't have save states, so I had to just play it for real. So I ended up referring to a guide to kind of find some of those. So it was on the one hand, I appreciate that there's that discovery aspect. Yeah. And I think that makes the upgrade system more exciting, that you can stumble on these secret evolutions. But it also forces you to engage with the very basic and boring combat on a far more frequent basis to get those E.V.O points, which also kind of splits me in two, because I don't think a game has to be fun at all times. I think you could have things that serve the theme or the kind of the way it's structured. And I think some of the tediousness makes a point with the fact that it's evolution and you're eating and you're growing. It kind of thematically makes sense that it's tedious at times, but it like hit a breaking point at a certain point for me where I was just very bored of doing it constantly to try to stumble upon the right evolution. So then I did refer to a guide.
I've got a few things to say. I'm glad that, well, I was going to ask you if you found the moment-to-moment action to be satisfying, but it sounds like with that grinding, you said the very basic and boring gameplay.
Yeah. It's pretty rough.
Yeah. As I described it, that's it. You just bite and bite. And in some cases, it gets frustrating because there are too many enemies on screen. Yeah. And unless you have certain attacks, like if you have a certain level of jaw, you won't do any knockback to the enemy. And it'll just keep walking through you. And all they have to do is bump into you. Whereas you have to do your bite, which has a particular range, whether it's very short range or slightly longer range. But if you bite too far, you're not going to hit. Or I found so many times I would bite thinking I was in range, but I was like just out of range, or they would
Oh,
walk
same.
just
Yeah,
too far away from me. So there's a lot of
absolutely.
timing the bite button press,
Mm-hmm.
which was rough. You could also jump on top of enemies,
Yeah.
but interestingly, you can only jump on top of them once, and then if you land on them a second time, you get hit by them. So you
Yeah.
have to jump on them and bounce away, but they're not knocked back or stunned enough so that immediately when you land, they hit you a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
And usually
Yeah,
they get
jumping I didn't use
infused.
much
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah. It just was not effective. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when you were saying serving the theme, I found that to be really interesting because I wrote
Mm-hmm.
this down. Each area, as you span the level, could be considered to represent many millions of years of time in the game
Yeah.
time and in geological history because and I mean like the individual stages like Mario 1-1 would be. So just
Mm-hmm.
one stage, if I was imagining in my mind, oh, as I walk through this stage, this is taking about 1,000,000 years to just do this
Right.
stage because each world is, the first one's 50 million years. The second one is 70 million years. And if each world is made up of 9 to 18 levels, so just divide it. And that made sense to me because it takes you time to get these E.V.O points, and evolution is a very slow process. And then you use your E.V.O points and you finally get an upgrade. Well, that makes sense that it took you millions of years for your life form to evolve. So I liked that Ludo
Yeah.
narrative consonance or congruence, but it's tedious as hell. Grinding, yeah, I felt like, especially early on, I had to grind way more than I would want to
Yeah.
for the payoff. And it was not fun to grind. Some games you grind in and like doing the action is fun. If I'm playing
Yeah, or
Dark
comforting
Souls,
or
ding,
yeah.
ding, ding, Dark Souls. If I'm doing Dark Souls and I'm fighting to gain souls, every time I fight a thing, I'm having a great time doing the
Yeah.
fighting. So it's not just about like going to work and earning your money, earning your E.V.O
Mm-hmm.
points. It's fun to
Right.
do. You're playing and getting the reward. But in this case, I did not feel that. The other thing that I wanted to say was all of those options and the fact that they were very expensive and there were some that were less expensive, whatever, and you had to do all this grinding. Maybe that's why I didn't get very far as a kid. Maybe I don't remember
Yeah.
specifically, but I was probably trying out each and every one of those things, not realizing, as I did now, as a 40-year-old, that, yeah, just save it up if you can and
Mm-hmm.
buy the best thing because it's better than everything.
Right. Yeah. That ends up being the most efficient way to play the game. If you just want to play through the game, beat it, try to alleviate the repetition or alleviate the frustration, you just buy the most expensive thing and move on. And usually prioritize the thing that's going to help you do more damage is what I found to be the most useful.
Yeah, Jaws first, no matter what.
Yeah, Jaws first, always.
But here's the other thing. Even though I just said that I want to save up my E.V.O points and get the most expensive thing, the game's
Mm-hmm.
not easy. Like,
No.
if you have to hit something more than once, it's a struggle. So you want to get to the point where your bite kills whatever enemy you're grinding for in one hit. So
exactly. Yeah.
even though I wanted to save up my E.V.O points just to get the biggest, baddest Jaws, it was such an uphill battle, just like Evolution.
Yep.
and
true.
And I was encouraged to spend my points as soon as I had enough for an upgrade, just so that continuing would be a little bit easier. Because say my original Jaws did 1 hit point of damage, and the best Jaws did 25 points of damage, it would be a lot easier to get the amount of E.V.O points for those great Jaws if I was doing 4 points of damage per bite. So I would spend on the lesser Jaws just to have to recoup that money, the EVO points that I just
Oh,
spent
yeah.
on them, to then continue to go get the best ones. So I found myself
Right.
doing that a lot after thinking, oh, I'm just going to save up, and then realizing, wait, I'm making the game really hard. Save
Yeah, and
states.
I think with that, maybe some people enjoy this, but it ends up being that case of where you try to find the optimization of grinding, right? Where it's
Yeah.
almost like you're doing those mathematical formulas in your head of, okay, which level do I spend the least amount of time in, but I can kill the enemies in one hit and get this many X number of EVO points, which then lets me get to the most expensive thing the fastest with the least amount of struggle. So I don't enjoy that kind of thing, but maybe some would, to kind of optimize the path, so to speak.
Yeah. How did you find the overall curve since you played through the whole game? Did you find that it was hard at some points, easy at other points? Was it up and down? Was it continuous?
I honestly thought the beginning of each section would be more of a struggle because you're just weak, you're in the new environment, which again I think makes sense to that theming, and I didn't mind that. Honestly, the boss fights were such sharp difficulty curves. The They were so frustrating. I hate the boss fights in this game. They are basically an exercise in, can you avoid the stun lock from the
Mm-hmm.
boss? Because if you get stun locked by a boss, they do so much damage, even sometimes after you upgraded your body, that you're just screwed. Like, sorry, you got in the wrong spot. Like the shark in particular,
Yeah.
that shark killed me so many freaking times because it would stun lock me in just the right corner of that arena, and he would do so much damage. And I think I was fully upgraded at that point. I feel like those are so much worse than the rest of the game, and it makes it that much more frustrating when you're doing pretty well, you feel like you've upgraded, you feel like you're prepared, and then nope, sorry, this boss just has an annoying pattern and you're screwed.
Yeah. How many times did you die to the bee?
I actually did worse against the shark than the
Really?
bee. The bee wasn't as hard for me, and then you fight the bee again
Mm-hmm.
later on, which I'm guessing you didn't get to.
No, I think that I
It's
did get
easier the
that far. It
second
was
time.
easier.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
because we were just
Yeah,
stronger.
the
I think I
second
had
time's easier.
Tyrannosaurus jaws at that time.
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that one's much easier. The first time though, it's definitely another annoying one, but the shark was the one that stood out to me that
Yeah.
I really struggled against.
What else? Let's be more specific about the game, because I think that is the most interesting part, is the arc of what you're doing, what you're seeing. Because as I said, we're going through time, and we span from 5 million BC all the way up to 3 million BCE. BCE, folks, BCE. And you go from being a fish in that first world to being potentially a human being, or a Homo erectus, or whatever you are at that point. But each world is so cool with the map, how it changes, right? Like it's meant to mimic what the globe looked like at that time, the way that the continents had shifted, and it all makes a lot of sense. Like you start to see the world coming together, and by the end it's like, oh yeah, look at that, there's North America, South America, Africa.
Right.
You can warp between South America and Africa as you can in real life. I thought that was really cool, and how like different areas had different animals, like the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs somehow survived beyond when they were supposed to be all extinct in this game.
Right.
But even then, like, it was interesting. They're like, oh, it's so hot here, we're good here. And then the mammals are like, oh, it's too hot down there, we can't survive there. That sort of thing. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That's like realistic. I like that. I love intellectual academic things, even if it's not exactly right.
Yeah, even though they take creative liberties with it, like the progression, like you said, feels pseudo academic and feels more engaging as a result. And you see that, like you said, in the environment, the way the continents start to form at the end, or you kind of could see that a little bit. I think that ends up being what makes it so distinctive, and why we see it on hidden gems lists, is that there's not many games that have done that even to this day, that commit so faithfully to the theme.
Yeah, and there are so many sprites. There have to be like it's like a record of how many different individual like player sprites there can be, first of all, with all the combinations of the different body parts, but also you encounter lots of different animals throughout the game. All these different kinds of fish and invertebrates. Then you have the world essentially of amphibians and a bunch of different types of amphibians. That's pretty short-lived. Then you start to see different lizards. What else? Maybe some insects, right? They talk about how, there are plants now, and that's changing the atmosphere. Therefore, blah blah blah, beep bop boo, and it's vaguely accurate, which is cool. Then you see like little mammals, then bigger mammals, then the dinosaurs come back for no explicable reason, but that's okay because every kid loves dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Then we have the Ice Age, and we start to see like woolly mammoths and ape people and birds. And there's just such a variety, and I really enjoyed that. That's my favorite part of the game, probably. More so even than evolving my own character, is seeing the world change as you would expect. But again, I'm a nerd. And I was just nerding on this exact topic.
Right, you happen to be watching videos on this topic. What a perfect segue into that game.
Did you have a favorite age or era in the game?
I mean, I really like dinosaurs a lot. Like when I was a kid, I liked dinosaurs a lot. So the Age of Dinosaurs was very cool. I don't know how functionally interesting it was, but I thought, or I guess how much I enjoyed doing this, but I thought it was cool how it expanded to things like your neck length could be adjusted. Like you could go up and down with your neck at that point. I feel like some of the transformations and evolutions get a little more interesting at that point in the game versus when you're in the water at the beginning and then when you first get on land. And then I did, like I said, fly at a certain point. And that was really cool. You can get wings to fly through the air during, I think it's end of Age of Dinosaurs or Ice Age it might be when that happens.
I think you encounter birds this giant bird in the Age of Dinosaurs when you go up into the Tower of Birds.
That sounds right.
Which is ridiculous, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's when it is, but it's definitely just insane because you end up in this sky temple with warps in it, and it's a maze to get to the end. There's a secret elephant evolution in there. Oh, we should talk about some of that, the different colored crystals.
The secret ones. Yeah, or the red, the orbs.
And then oh God, when you're warping in this weird warp temple in the sky, you can leave the warps from either direction and then you can't go back the other way. So you have to warp back and then warp back. Oh my God, tedious.
Yeah.
But that's sweet bird. So how did you become a bird? I really want to know about this because when I was going through evolutions, I found that sometimes I would have to, for example, in the dinosaur era, evolve to 2 legs. And then I was on 2 legs. And then I looked in that area again, the legs and arms, and it said evolve to 2 legs again. And I'm like, I'm already on 2 legs. So I did it again and I stood more upright. So I got this sense that there were very specific paths that you had to follow, like sequences of upgrading. So how did you manage to do the bird thing?
Yeah, so it is one of the ones where you have to get evolutions in a certain order or a certain combination. There might also, I'm trying to remember, be a red crystal at a certain point. Because you mentioned we should mention that. Just briefly, I'll say you can come across these, I think they're red crystals that let you evolve into a much stronger progression that you might see later in the game. And you only get it for about 2 minutes maybe. But what's very cool is you can register that in this record of evolutions. And then if you find a green crystal, you can evolve into anything you've recorded. So that thing that you only had for 2 minutes, now you can just be that thing because you've recorded it. So I might have done some of that too, but I think it was a special combination. So I want to say like during the Ice Age, maybe that might be when it happened that I could fly around at a certain point.
That's really cool.
And it looks really cool. You're up in the clouds and
Yeah, like where do you go? Does you fly really high vertically?
You go up and then you go and then it's just horizontal at that point once you're up in the clouds, but it's a really nice visual.
I'm so
Mechanically, it's not
jealous.
the most interesting thing, but it was a nice change of pace.
Yeah, especially since walking around on the ground is never dynamic. Like,
True.
once you get to the ground, it's pretty much the same. Like, you can make yourself jump really high with certain things or move
Hmm.
slightly faster, but essentially it kind of feels the same for the rest of
Yeah,
that
that's true.
time. I did like that later era when you got onto the land, and not so much the first early creatures of land, but like you said, the dinosaurs and the Ice Age got really
Hmm.
interesting because there was a variety, so much of a variety of things you could do, like with the different
Yeah.
rhinoceros shaped body, horse shaped body, rabbit shaped body,
Yeah, it expands a
cat
lot at that
shaped
point.
body. Like I
Hmm.
made a lion sort of character. Um, yeah, that was fun. I think probably, if I remember correctly, I enjoyed that Ice Age. That's where you fight the Yeti
Yep.
and the you fight, yeah, so some of the bosses are funny. You fight a Yeti that then after you kill the Yeti, his baby, his son is like, "Oh my god, my
Right.
dad's dead." And you're like,
What have you
"Jeez."
done?
And then the mom comes out all pink and
Yeah.
gigantic and then fights you.
Right.
And there are these woolly mammoths in the other part, and you fight three of them at a time because they are like enemies of the Yeti, and they think you're
Yeah.
the Yeti, even though you look like a lizard, which makes no sense. What are other weird things like that? With the killer bee, the king
Yeah,
bee, and the
queen
queen
bee.
bee.
There's a bird. There's a giant bird in the Ice Age near the end, I think, that you
Oh yeah,
fight.
so
That
this
looks pretty
giant
cool.
bird
Yeah.
is like more of a like a Ninja Gaiden boss,
Yeah. Yeah.
almost. Like
Right.
it's very mobile, flying
Hmm.
all over the place. Has a great huge sprite, like
It looks really
Punch Out
cool.
sized.
Yeah.
Yeah, really cool, crazy. Oh, and
Yeah.
that reminds
Wild.
me that sometimes you have you have these interactions. There's dialogue whenever you meet
Hmm.
some particular boss or character that's important. You
Hmm.
can say, yes, I'll join you, or like, no, I
Oh,
won't
right.
join you, or I won't help you.
Yeah.
But if you pick the wrong thing, sometimes either it doesn't matter, or they'll give you the choice again and you have to pick the other one. Or I
Yeah.
think in the bird one, they kick you completely out of the bird temple. And
Oh,
if you
do
want to
they?
go back again, you have to go in again.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
that's
It's
brutal.
funny. At one point, I decided to join the Tyrannosaurs at the end
Hmm.
of the dinosaur age. And they
Okay.
were like, okay, well, the world dies or you go extinct, the meteors come, you're all blown
Yeah.
up, and that's it. And
And
then
that's
just
that.
reset. It reset back to me going in to talk to the Tyrannosaurus. I was like,
Oh,
oh,
wow.
well, I guess that was the wrong
I guess
choice.
I was wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it has a lot of those interesting little nuances, and also throughout the game, not just from characters that you meet up with, you get these kind of dialogue boxes that are just the whispers of the background
Mm.
or
Hmm.
the animals in general of that area are like, we don't like the sharks,
Right.
or oh, there's that part with the sharks versus the whales, or the Rogon versus
Oh,
the
uh-huh.
whales. Like,
Yeah.
you're joining the whales? We're trying to. So you see a lot of this interspecies conflict that you're
Hmm.
not even a part of, but of course you become a part of. And I
Right.
thought that was cool too.
Yeah, it gives it some personality. I think again it kind of helps with that theming. There's not much of a story if you think about it, but just the little dialogue boxes interactions, I think I enjoyed them every time they popped up, or if you talk to a boss right before you fight them. I think that really
Hmm.
adds a lot to the game.
Yeah. What I didn't like was when I was jumping into a stage
Hmm.
and the dialogue box for the boss came up,
Oh,
and now they attack immediately after they're done talking to
right. They
me,
get an
and I'm
advantage.
like, and I'm stuck in midair right where they're aiming. This was with the bee. I died to the
Yeah.
bee 1,000
Hmm.
times.
Yeah. Bee
The
was fun.
first bee, king bee.
Yeah.
What did you think of the graphics and the sound? Because I have
Yeah.
opinions.
Yeah, when we were talking about specifically the sprite work on the big bird boss, that made
Yeah,
me think, visually I like this game quite a bit. I feel like when
yeah,
we
me
were
too.
seeing reviews, people are pretty down on the visuals, but I think the sprite work's really strong. I like the variety and all the different builds you can have for your creature. I think the backgrounds look pretty nice, like the mountains in the background, some of the parallax scrolling. So visually, I thought it was quite good, to be honest.
Yeah, and it represents the world really well. Like the scale. When you're a dinosaur,
yeah, that's true.
There are trees in the background, but the trees are small. They're like just a little bit bigger than you. So even though you don't change size on the screen, the background kind of shrinks. Yeah. So you are bigger. And some of the individual sprites, like some of the dinosaurs, I remember the Stegosaurus specifically, when you hit it, it goes into this hurt animation where its eye bulges out and its mouth opens as it curls in pain, things like that. Yeah. So I thought that was good. Yeah. The music, on the other hand,
music,
I did not think was good. I liked the overworld track, but everything else I was like, what?
Well, the music because I even noted, because for the most part, I think the soundtrack's kind of annoying. There's like very kooky sounding music a lot of the time when you're walking on foot. But I did like the music when you talk to Gaia, I think is great. Mm-hmm. There's some music during the Ice Age periods. They're very keyboard heavy that are quite nice.
Okay.
And then the music that plays when the asteroids hit and kill the dinosaurs, I thought was very atmospheric as well. But those are just a few examples. I'm trying to give it somewhat of a benefit of a doubt because 90% of the time I was just kind of annoyed with the music.
That's the thing. The music that's good is so specific and minimal. Like it's only at these certain times. Whereas the music that you're listening to for hours while you're grinding is not. And interestingly enough, I didn't mention this before. This music was done by Koichi Sugiyama, who did all of the Dragon Quest games from 1 to 11.
How is that possible?
Exactly. Did he care about this?
Maybe he got punished for some reason and they made him do this soundtrack.
And interestingly enough, also, this was made for that other E.V.O game, 4.6 Billion Year Story, and they just took the music and put it in this one too.
Interesting.
So that might be why
maybe that's why
is incongruous with some of the action. Mm-hmm. Like they said, this song I guess goes here. Doesn't really fit, but we got the music. Might as well use it. It
doesn't fit well. We were talking about how great the theming is, and how much better would it have been if the music was actually appropriate for what's going on. It's just too upbeat and kooky most of the time.
Yeah. What else? I mean, I feel like I covered everything I want to say, honestly. No. I need you to explain what the heck's going on at the end. Are there aliens and a weird
it's really weird. Yeah.
Cosmic horror amoeba? With
you
Cthulhu
go into this
mouth.
Yeah, for the end of the game, at the end of the Age of Man, I think it's called, you fight this giant amoeba inside of a flesh place. I don't know that they explain
like a
it
flesh
well.
Cave.
Yeah, a flesh cave, and I think the amoeba is essentially like become the most powerful creature. It absorbed all the orbs apparently, so now it's the most powerful creature, and it wants to join Gaia and become Gaia's partner in life. So that's why you have to fight this amoeba at the end, so that you can take her rightful place with Gaia and help with the expansion of the world and help civilization become better. But it's really bizarre, and I like how weird it gets at the end, to be honest. I like that they take some wild swings with some of that, even though the rest of it's pretty grounded. So yeah, the end of the game is a weird flesh cave with giant amoeba, and it's it's weird for sure.
So every game you and I play about animals turns into a fever dream of outer space.
That's what we do here. That's Smashing Bricks.
And there are aliens at the end, right? They're like, at the very end of the game, there's a couple of aliens looking at Earth.
Kind of in
like,
the epilogue section.
We'll just leave them alone.
Because I think, if I recall correctly, I think it's like, it kind of looks like Mars. And the idea is that these aliens maybe place the orbs to like do something with Earth, and they kind of regret it, I want to say. So the
Yeah.
idea is like they were the ones who kind of started all this orb business. Yeah, it's
That's
real
cool.
bizarre.
I think
But
they
I
should
like it.
remake this game. I think they should
Sure.
remake this game in 2025 in full 3D, open world, on like the Elden Ring engine,
Yeah.
and put in a badass story written by George R.R. Martin. Or
He's
no,
not going to
some
finish that other
sci-fi
book.
writer. A
Help
sci-fi
us remake
writer.
E.V.O. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever played Tokyo Jungle? I feel like that's the most recent analog for
No.
E.V.O. It's
Tokyo Jungle. I'll look into it though.
Yeah, look into Tokyo Jungle. That might scratch your itch a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So final thoughts time. At the end of every episode, we decide whether the game that we played was worth going back to and playing in 2025 and beyond, and whether we would recommend it. So, if it is worth going back to or was worth going back to, it's a smash. And if it's not, well, then it's more of a brick. So, Anthony LaBella, educator extraordinaire, what do you say about this educational quote-unquote game?
Yes. So I was really back and forth on this one because I, spoke a lot of positives today about the theming, about the upgrade system. But I think most of the time when you're playing, you are walking and you are biting and you are getting stun locked. And the bosses in particular are very annoying. So when I kind of think back on the whole experience, unfortunately, I'm going to have to call this one a brick.
Okay. I think going back to the 1992 or 3 review of this game in GamePro, they really captured what I had to say, in that the game has an interesting concept, but the sluggish gameplay may make you return to the caves. And they also found the background music to range from soothing, some of the ones that we mentioned, to, as you said, quote, annoying. Yeah, I love the concept. I have a really soft spot in my heart for this game because of my past experience. I love the idea. I love the evolutions. I love the levels as they change, as the world changes, as you see different enemies, etc. But the game's not really worth playing. Yeah. The grinding is extensive. Too much and not fun. The hitboxes, the hurt boxes, not well tuned. The plodding from left to right and right to left, basic. The jumping on platforms, incredibly basic. The level design, we didn't even really get into it a lot. Yeah. But it's
There's not much
essentially
to talk about.
all flat.
Yeah.
Except for like maybe a few platforms. The underwater levels had more variety because you had more verticality, and I assume maybe the flying would be more interesting. But overall, the actual game part of the game did not hit. And that's hard to say because I really thought that I loved this game. This is one of those games where, the concept of the podcast, go back to the games that we played and thought were good. Well, this one did not hold up, and I must call it a brick, sadly.
Sorry,
so, E.V.O, Search for Eden, was not and is not worth revisiting in 2025 and beyond, and it is a brick. Thank you for listening and for playing along with us if you did. And please tell your friends. Share any episode of this podcast on any social media and tell them how much you love listening to us. That would be super helpful. And even more so, please leave us a review. Any review. I know it's going to be 5 stars, so I'm not going to ask you to leave a generous and helpful 5-star rating and review, which is totally free. But if you love the podcast, you can really help out by leaving us a review. It will help the algorithm. It'll get the word out. If you want to go above and beyond that, you can support the show monetarily and get some fun perks by going over to patreon.smashingbricks.com or patreon.com/smashingbricks. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month. $5 can get you in on the Power Up episodes, and it can get you an extra bonus episode every single month. That is a great tier, and I recommend it. Beyond that, you can get continuous recognition on the show every episode, like Ms. Muso is getting right now as a Tanuki level supporter. And if you're a Starman tier supporter, you can join me on the show. You're crazy, but you can do that, and you'll have fun. We also have a Discord server for anyone who listens. You can jump into the Discord and talk about anything you want, about the upcoming episodes, about the past episodes, about the pizzas that I make constantly, whatever. And you can find all the links to everything, plus other stuff, at links.smashingbricks.com. As for next episode, Mr. Anthony LaBella will be returning, and we will be playing... We're not quite sure yet, but I'll tell you both games that we're thinking about. We're debating between Devil May Cry for the PS2 or Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker for the GameCube. We're figuring that out, but we'll know soon, and I'll announce that. So get your hands on both of those, play them both, send in your thoughts, and join us next time on Smashing Bricks. That wraps it up for today. I'm still Eddie Inzauto. That is Anthony LaBella.
Anthony LaBella, yes.
And until next time, may the nostalgia be with you.